Americans. How did it get this way? I am constantly astonished reading some of the employment practices that seem to be the norm in the US. I am in Europe. Things like no paid holidays, no parental leave, being fired for no reason with no notice, having to find your own cover if off sick, being expected to work extra hours as a norm, etc. My question is, how did it get this way? How did the development of workers' rights in the rest of the world bypass the US? And why did you allow it? One step at a time. Since the 60s it has been the goal of the 1% to crush the middle class. It had grown post-WW2 with the GI Bill educating so many first-generation students and elevating them into the middle class. A growing middle class presented a political danger to the interests of the wealthy. Its growth took away from their status and privilege. So it had to be both shrunk and turned against the lower class. Nixon started it. Reagan perfected it with anti-union laws, demonizing the poor, slashing pensions, underfunding education and loosing the taxes and regulations on corporations. Classism, sexism, racism and religion are all used to further separate working-class Americans, who have more in common than not, and to give them someone to focus their anger and blame on when their own upward mobility stalls. All the while the rich get richer. Corporations hold all the power now. Wages are not aligned with the cost of living. People vote against their self-interests or believe they will be the next Jeff Bezos. Corporations aren't really held accountable. My employer didn't pay me for 2 weeks and I'm still waiting for the Labor Department to do anything about it. Maybe I'm just being cynical, but I think a lot of it had to do with the worship of the rich. So many people in this country developed this mindset that the rich will save us all, and that giving them all the benefits and opportunities possible will allow everyone else to be showered in wealth. There is so much corruption in the US governor that they're willing to let things be as they are so the politicians can continue receiving donations from large corporations and individual wealthy types. Basically, the rich run the US. But the way the US markets itself is the opposite. We're a country governed by the people, for the people. Unfortunately, corporations are considered people, not American. But from my POV, too goddamn many people in America work 23 jobs, like 16 hours or some. I don't think those poor souls don't have the mental, physical capacity to awaken. They are even struggling to stay awake physically. Also, the mental distractions or doctrination of buy, consume. Look at how we rich people live. You can do that too. I think this Western, materialistic view has, kind of, convinced people to live like this is a normal way of living. A little bit at a time. Employers, corporations, etc. just keep taking and it becomes the norm. Eventually it's just how things have always been done. We have mega core that are 100% monopolies. They collide to fix prices, wages, and no one stops them. Politicians are bought and paid for. The Republican versus Democrat fight is just theater. We re-elect the same corrupt person over and over because the other option is, that guy can't let the other side run things. Better re-elect the person we think can win, even if they are a decrepit elderlich. Canada is very much the same, though we don't have any, at-will, provinces. But that just means they work around the system. I worked at fruit-named tech company that used to make cell phones. Sea levels. Get nice big bonus. The plebs, 2%, laid a bunch off for COVID reasons, but still took the government handout. I blame it mostly on when corporations were given the same rights as human citizens. After that, private funding to senators, governors, and other lobbyists became the norm. Kinda like how the governor of Texas's top donor is a construction company. I'm sure that had absolutely nothing to do with the water break right being cancelled for construction workers. You could pull this thread way back beyond the founding of this country. There's a long tradition of treating people like property in the United States, and I would argue it set the stage for our current non-functional work culture. More immediately, I'd cite the anti-communist hysteria that came in several waves of the early 20th century. Through the late 19th and first half of the 20th century, organized labor was making huge strides. However, the ruling groups were able to harness racial discord and anti-communist fervor to kneecap the most progressive groups in labor. Union membership peaked in 1979 by total numbers, 1954 by percentage. This is when Reagan picked up where Nixon left off. The boomers were taking over politically and economically. They were convinced that it was in their best interest to roll back worker protections and make a freer market, trading off the success of previous generations. They leveraged this for rapid short-term gains and convinced themselves unions, regulations, and anything other than rampant greed was bad. Europe is the new American dream. Reagan busting the air traffic controllers union in the 80s was the start of many problems also. Reagan lowered taxes on the rich drastically and passed the tax burden down to the middle class, working poor. Also, Reagan deregulated the heck out of everything. He is responsible for the 2009 housing crash. And other industries got in bed with Middle Eastern interests, etc. Sending a trend here? Republicans basically want the government gone and every part of our lives privatized for profit. Also interesting to look into when the NRA got involved in politics. Late 70s. Since then the country has become way more conservative. Q. Why is thing wrong in America? A. Racism. Extreme Christianity. Our capitalism. Usually by way of Ronald Reagan. Lead-based paint. It's called the American dream. You have to be asleep to believe it. Reagan. Off the top of my head. Racism, more diversity. The US is far more racially and ethnically diverse than Western European countries, and it's an easy and very effective way to distract and divide the working class. I remember reading something during Obama's term about Germans talking about why they were in favor of some degree of socialized healthcare, and the shared sentiment was, well, we're all Germans. After the heavy migration of the last 10-15 plus years into Western Europe, you're starting to see that break down. With a lot of, hey, why are benefits and taxes going to help those people? And the rise of far-right and nationalist parties. An NBSP, two-party system and U.S. electoral rules have made it pretty much impossible for a socialist party to gain any power. Many parts of the U.S. had a surprisingly strong local, state socialist party presence in the 1900s, but weren't able to gain national power. Also, the far too small size of Congress and the Senate allowing small states the same representation of 100 times larger allows property owners, rich people with land a widely disproportionate amount of power, and NBSP. Obscenely high U.S. military spending and presence has benefited Western European countries, who have been able to spend far less on their own militaries and instead use that money on a stronger social safety net while being protected from outside threats. Because America is an oligarchy, our politicians are responsible for this situation. Constant erosion of workers' rights. Imagine entire society always making political decisions as if they are or expect one day to be the employer. Capitalism. End goal of capitalism is minimum cost and maximum profit with no competition. People are costs. They would prefer if you were rapidly breeding, young dying, slaves. It maximizes profits.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Ericast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.